Ethel Kennedy, widow of Robert F. Kennedy, has died after suffering a stroke last week. Her grandson, former Congressman Joe Kennedy III, announced the news on social media. He says, quote, "She was a devout Catholic and a daily communicant, and we are comforted in knowing she's reunited with the love of her life, our father, Robert F. Kennedy." Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl has more on her life and legacy.
Ethel Kennedy's life was marked by a tireless dedication to service, resilience, and tragedy. She was part of America's most powerful political dynasty. Ethel forged a relentless path on her own as a human rights advocate, fighting against poverty with leaders like Coretta Scott King, and championing the work of those standing up for human rights around the world. She was born Ethel Skakel in 1928 in Chicago, Illinois, the daughter of a former railroad clerk who gained his fortune building his own company. As a student at Manhattanville College in New York, she shared a room with Gene Kennedy. Ethel was 17 years old when she met Gene's brother Robert on a skiing vacation.
He was standing in front of an open fireplace, and I just turned around. I walked in the door and turned and saw him and thought, whoa.
Ethel and Robert married in a lavish ceremony 5 years later. They eventually settled in a Washington, D.C. suburb and started a family, Ethel giving birth to their first of 11 children a year after they were married. She was intent on instilling a sense of service in her children from a young age.
When other mothers were taking their children to the playground to make castles in the sandbox, to ride on the seesaw, to climb the jungle gym, my mother brought my brothers and I to the Senate Racket Committee hearings.
Her first foray into politics came when Gene brought her to Boston to work on her brother John F. Kennedy's 1946 House campaign. She loved the experience, and after she became a member of the family, she hosted events for John Kennedy's 1952 Senate race and his 1960 race for the White House. In 1961, she stepped further into the national spotlight when her husband Robert became the Attorney General in his brother's administration. But in 1963, life came to a devastating halt when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Robert Kennedy would eventually resign as Attorney General in 1964 to run for Senate from New York.
I just want to thank each and every one of you for making this such a happy night for Bobby.
4 years after his successful Senate bid, Robert ran for president on a platform of social justice.
Thank you very much.
They hit the campaign trail again. Ethel once again at his side as they racked up primary victories.
My wife, Ethel, who's, as all of you know, has made such a major difference in this campaign and a major difference for me.
Greeting throngs of supporters across the country. She was there at the Ambassador Hotel celebrating his primary win in California the night he was killed.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you.
Shot just moments after giving his victory speech. After his death, she retreated from the public eye to devote time to her family. Her youngest child, Rory, born 6 months after her father's death. Ethel was a devout Catholic and looked to her faith in heartbreak, including the death of her parents in a plane crash in 1955 and her brother in another crash 11 years later. Then in 1984 came the loss of her son David from an overdose, and again in 1997 when her son Michael died in a skiing accident. She also outlived 2 of her grandchildren and a great-grandson. Ethel turned personal tragedy into action, dedicating her life to carrying on the work her husband started. She established the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, a nonprofit promoting social activism and other causes championed by her late husband.
Ethel, the light of his life, who stood with him on countless platforms and around the nation and around the world.
And she continued to fight for human rights issues on her own, marching arm in arm with the United Farm Workers in 1970 and sitting in support of Cesar Chavez, advocating for the poor and disadvantaged, and standing with civil rights leaders. At the age of 86, she took part in the Ice Bucket Challenge with her family to raise money for ALS research and challenging then-President Obama to do the same.
President Obama, I nominate you.
She sought no accolades for her work. instead focusing on highlighting the accomplishments of others. But President Obama honored Ethel Kennedy in 2014 with a Presidential Medal of Freedom for her lifetime commitment to service and justice.
She has touched the lives of countless people around the world with her generosity and her grace.